In the spring of 1940, as Hitler's armies stormed across Europe, a young woman stood at a crossroads. Her name was Nancy Wake, a fiery Australian journalist turned housewife living in Marseille, France. She could have fled, returned to the safety of her homeland as war consumed the continent. Instead, she chose to fight, not with a rifle in hand, but with courage, cunning, and an unbreakable will that would make her one of the most feared enemies of the Nazi regime. This is the story of Nancy Wake, the White Mouse, a woman who defied an empire and became a legend of the French resistance. Nancy Wake was no stranger to grit. Born in 1912 in New Zealand and raised in rugged Australia, she'd run away from home as a teen, working odd jobs before landing in Europe as a freelance journalist. By 1939, she'd married a wealthy Frenchman, Henri Fiocca, and settled into a life of luxury in Marseille. But when she saw Nazi brutality firsthand, Jewish families rounded up, neighbors disappearing into the night, something snapped. She later said, "I hate the Germans and all their works. I'd do anything to see them gone." And so she did. By 1940, Nancy was smuggling messages, forging papers, and guiding downed Allied pilots to safety under the noses of the Gestapo. The Nazis dubbed her the White Mouse for her ability to slip through their traps, a nickname she'd soon make infamous. Nancy joined the French resistance early, working with the Pat O'Leary Line, an underground network that spirited Allied airmen out of occupied France. She became a courier, crisscrossing the countryside on a bicycle, her charm disarming suspicious German patrols. Once, stopped at a checkpoint, she flashed a dazzling smile and claimed to be delivering love letters, hiding a coded message in her basket. By 1942, she'd helped over 200 pilots escape to Spain, each one a blow to the Nazi war machine. But the Gestapo was closing in. Her husband, Henri, urged her to flee as their home was raided. Nancy escaped over the Pyrenees after a grueling trek. Arrested once, she bluffed her way free. Henri stayed behind to cover her trail. She wouldn't learn until later that he'd been tortured and executed for her defiance. By 1943, Nancy was in England, training with the Special Operations Executive, the SOE, an elite group tasked with sabotaging the Axis from within. At 31, she parachuted back into France, landing in the Auvergne region to lead a band of 7,000 Maquis fighters. She was no desk-bound planner. Nancy fought alongside her men, blowing up bridges, ambushing convoys, and cutting German supply lines ahead of D-Day. Once, low on funds, she cycled 300 miles in 72 hours across enemy territory to replace lost radio codes, dodging patrols with legs burning and no sleep. Her men adored her. She drank with them, swore like a sailor, and killed a German sentry with her bare hands when he stumbled on their hideout. The Gestapo's bounty on her head soared to 5 million francs, but they'd never catch the White Mouse. The summer of 1944 tested Nancy like never before. On June 20th, her Maquis group faced a German assault, 2,000 troops against her 500. Outnumbered and outgunned, she rallied her fighters, leading a counterattack that held the line for hours. Amid the chaos, she ran through gunfire to retrieve explosives, blasting a key road to halt the enemy advance. They survived, but at a cost. Many of her men fell that day. Afterward, she wept for the first time, mourning the boys she'd come to see as family. Yet she pressed on. By August, as the Allies liberated Paris, Nancy marched into Vichy with her Maquis, greeted as a hero. Her war wasn't over, but her spirit remained unbroken, even as she learned of Henri's death. a wound she'd carry in silence. When the war ended, Nancy Wake had helped cripple the German occupation, saved countless lives, and earned the George Medal, the French Croix de Guerre, and a slew of honors from nations she'd fought for. She returned to Australia, ran for Parliament, and later lived quietly in London, sipping gin and tonics at her favorite pub until her death in 2011 at age 98. To the Nazis, she was a phantom. To her comrades, a lioness. Her story reminds us that heroism isn't bound by gender or rank. It's forged in the choices we make when the world grows dark. Nancy Wake didn't just survive the war. She shaped it, proving that even one voice, one will, can turn the tide. The echoes of Nancy Wake's war whisper through the streets of France today, a legacy of defiance and sacrifice. She was part of a generation that stared down tyranny and refused to blink. Not for fame, but for freedom. What might we do in our own time with a fraction of her fire? Thank you for joining us on this journey. If her story stirs you, subscribe for more tales of courage from the past that light our way forward. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight.